Today, we discuss all the injured players across all the positions that we think are relevant buys for your dynasty leagues. We also talk about whether or not the injury landscape this year has changed our macro dynasty strategy at all. Stick around for all that and more. And welcome into the Dino Construction Podcast. Justin, joined as always by David and JP. First week of the NFL fantasy playoffs is in the books. How'd you guys do this week?
I lost one heartbreaker, but 4-1 overall. 7 semifinals out of, I think, 11 competing leagues. So not bad.
Nice. Now I have a lot of rebuilders this year, but there's two I was trying to make the playoffs in. One of them I did, and I won this week. It wasn't an amazing week, but we're moving on.
How's next week look for you in that one, JP?
You're going down, buddy. You're going down.
I'm excited, buddy. I'm glad it's you.
I went 4-1 as well this week. I have 2 matchups with David, and I also had 4 bye teams. So I have 8 semifinals, 2 against David. Excited to beat you in both those leagues next week, bud.
Yeah, the Michigan versus Ohio State recency has me a little shook. So not much confidence there.
We got you. We got your number. All right, so hopping right into today's episode, talking the college football playoffs from a dynasty perspective. So we are going to touch on every player from every matchup that we think is going to be relevant, guys that we're going to keep an eye on for the NFL draft season that we're getting ready to transition to shortly. One thing we love about dynasty, right? There's no off season. So let's just kind of go ahead and dive right into this playoff bracket.
Yeah, before we go on, I just want to do a couple qualifying statements so we don't have to keep repeating ourselves. PFF for a lot of the data, so the height and size is there. Obviously, that'll be updated at the combine for those that declare. Also, they have a lot of great data, but they don't offer some of the efficiency metrics that we really like. So we'll look into those in the offseason. That'll definitely change some views. As far as the rankings, we'll put in the description the qualifiers we used, how many dropbacks to qualify, how many carries, so on, just in case you care. Most people probably don't. Just wanted to throw that out there before we started.
And let's get started with the 9 seed Tennessee Volunteers, who David's telling me the Twitter community of this team is really getting under his skin. Keep up the good work, guys. At the 8 seed Ohio State Buckeyes. Let's start with the road team. JP, can you tell me who we want to watch for these Volunteers?
Yeah, there's really only one guy I've got my eye on that's going to be most likely in the 2025 NFL draft. They do have a quarterback in Nico. That's going to be a last name next year that it's going to be hard to pronounce, but he's in his second year, so he's not going to be eligible this season. They have a pretty darn good running back there, and his name is Dylan Sampson. Now, the reason he's not so highly touted is because he's listed at 5'11", 201, so he's a little bit on the lighter side, which, modern NFL might not be too big of a deal. Could measure in heavier. And he also is, like we said, playing at Tennessee, which their track record for running backs and how wide open their offense is just give some people some skepticism as prospects. But he had a really, really good season. I mean, he had the most rushing touchdowns in the Power 4, led the SEC in rushing yards. And, I mean, he was top 10 in multiple metrics per PFF, like David mentioned, with at least 100 carries. This guy, he had 1,482 rushing yards and 22 rushing touchdowns. 22. It was a record there. But this is a guy that if he has a strong playoff push here, I mean, he'd probably have to beat Ohio State and really push further into the playoffs. Sorry, David, for him to have a really strong playoff run. He could be a guy who's maybe RB6 or 7 in this class if he does continue to rise, but he's definitely somebody I got my eye on.
Those type of touchdown numbers playing against SEC opponents can't be a scrub. So definitely a guy to keep an eye on. And David, we always defer to you for our Ohio State Buckeye analysis. Who are you watching on the Buckeyes as they get eliminated?
Yeah, just real quick, want to reply to the comment on the Volunteers Twitter. It has been fun, and we really got to point out. I'm gonna have to link the guy's handle in the description or something. This guy is a charity. He's a Volunteers fan. They raise a lot of money and buy stuff for sick kids when they travel to an opposing team. Just super cool thing they've done. They've raised almost $20,000 this year for a Buckeye kid, and putting some of that to research for the disease he has. So just super cool. Once you move that to the side, it's definitely been an interesting dynamic. It seems like they think they're traveling to like Indiana This is a little different animal in Columbus. So just hoping my fans and my boys show up, show a little pride in the program, kind of feels like that's on the line here. Now to talk about some of these players real quick. First two guys we're going to talk about, running backs, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson. Judkins in his third season, Henderson in his fourth. Judkins transferred to Ohio State from Ole Miss this season. They did split the backfield, so their counting stats are not great, but they were pretty efficient. They looked good when they had their opportunities. Looked a lot better earlier in the year. Ohio State's offensive line is a bit banged up at this point, but they are both top of the line NFL prospects. Henderson had some injuries, otherwise he probably would have left last year. These two are going to be ranked pretty close to each other, probably in that like 3 to 6 range for most running backs when we get all said and done there. Then wide receiver Emeka Egbuka, also in his fourth season, kind of a down year statistically, 60 receptions, 743 yards, 9 touchdowns. Though in 2022, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s sophomore season, as well as Emeka Egbuka's, they had very similar numbers, just a handful of catches, yards, and touchdowns apart. So he's definitely shown he can do it. But a couple of, I'm not going to say bad years, but years that definitely did not meet expectation over the last two. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up going. Some people have him as high as wide receiver, like 2 or 3 in that range. I don't think there's enough to push him down too much further, but I do think back into the top 5 is probably where he lands.
And on those running backs, with a strong playoff, do either of these have what it takes to kind of push their way up to RB2 in the class, do you think, David?
I'd love to see it. I do kind of think Hampton and Caleb Johnson, Hampton out of North Carolina, Johnson out of Iowa, are above these two right now. It would take quite a run for one of these two to overtake them. I think they've had the hype in the past, though, and they'll probably test well. So I'm not going to say there's no chance. I just wouldn't bet on it.
All right. And we know they're not going to make a playoff run anyway, so it was just kind of a fun question. Maybe, just maybe, the Buckeyes will win. And if they do, they will go on to play the Oregon Ducks. So let's go ahead and talk about them here, JP. Who should we be watching when they take the field?
Yeah, they have a quarterback that's at least somewhat interesting. It's a Dylan Gabriel, but this is a guy, he's 6 foot tall, 200 pounds. So he's on the smaller side, and he's also going into his sixth college season here. So not somebody that we're super excited about, but he's had a pretty good year. He's the fourth lowest turnover worthy plays among quarterbacks with 300 dropbacks and the fifth highest PFF passing grade. So this is a guy who maybe is a guy we're taking a shot on like the fourth round of rookie drafts or something. But I mean, who knows if he has a really strong playoff run that he could rise up a bit, but I don't see it happening too much. A guy I'm very interested in is their running back, Jordan James. He's 5'10", 210 pounds, and he is in his junior season. And he's the third best PFF run grade. He's the fifth most first downs. And this guy, when I watch him play, he's fighting for extra yards and he's eating contact. And he looks like a guy who's bigger than what he's listed at with the way he's able to like push piles. But he had a good year alongside Bucky Irving, who we now know that Bucky Irving is really darn good in the NFL. And Jordan James, his efficiency, it was right there with Bucky Irving's. It might have even been better. I don't have the numbers pulled up there, but yeah, I think this is a guy I'm very interested in. I think he really could rise up. Somebody I definitely have my eye on. And they have 2 wide receivers who are pretty, I don't feel super optimistic about either, but they both do have interesting marks. Tez Johnson, he's a small guy, 5'10", 165 pounds. I mean, we're looking like Tutu Atwell kind of size. And he's in his 5th season. He had a good year. He had 10 touchdowns, 866 yards, which, he's getting near that 1,000-yard mark. Maybe he will through the playoffs. He had 1,200 yards last season, which he had Bo Nix. We know that offense, it was doing really, really well. But he has the 15th best yards per route run. I mean, he is somebody that's interesting, at least that could be a guy we have our eye on. But Evan Stewart, this has been a very disappointing player because he's just extremely talented. He's a junior. It's his first year in Oregon, but he's just got 613 yards, 5 touchdowns. That was super, super highly touted coming out of high school. 5-star guy, super, super talented. And there's this list done every single year for guys coming out of high school. It's called the Freaks list for guys coming into college. And he was listed as the third freakiest athlete coming in to college too. This guy, he was a speedster. He had a 10.58 100-yard 100-meter dash, which that's faster than guys like Jalen Wright, who we saw last year. I think he ran in the 4.3s in the 40-yard dash. He looked like he could have been playing for the U.S. national soccer team as well. He's just a really good athlete, but it's just been disappointing. In the Big Ten championship game, he did nothing. He didn't have a single catch, and we were hoping that throughout the end of the year he would continue to rise up. Didn't really happen. They do have a tight end as well, who is kind of interesting. He's got good size at 6'5", 255 pounds, and he's had a solid year, 520 yards, which for a tight end, that's pretty darn good. He has the second, he's the second best among tight ends in yak per reception. So he's definitely a guy that I'll be watching in these games.
When you say been in college for a Van Wilder number of years, I mean, that just makes me think a little bit about, like Bo Nix and how pro ready he was. I mean, you look at the touchdowns, 28-6 interceptions, 72.6 completion percentage. Now, Bo Nix, of course, he transferred from Auburn, was it? He was a phenomenal athlete, high star recruit, just didn't play well there and kind of, learned, grew as a quarterback. Do you guys know offhand this guy's recruiting status? Was he highly touted? Does he have that kind of athletic ability, maybe that scramble ability to keep plays alive when we see him on the field? Is he someone that you think could be sneaky, kind of like that, to really keep an eye on?
We're talking about Gabriel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not as much because Bo Nix he just had one of those crazy good years. Like it was Heisman worthy. He was third in the Heisman with. I mean, he had 45 passing touchdowns, and he was in his fifth year. So I think it's a little bit different because Bo was more highly touted. He's a little bit bigger as well, a better athlete, and had a better final season. So I don't think he's quite in that conversation with Bo.
All right, just wanted to kind of touch on that out of my curiosity. These two are more the college football experts. I'm just good at yapping. And moving along from these three teams briefly, but just want to do a little reflection. Who has a realistic chance at being a first round rookie pick from the guys we have discussed so far?
You guys might think I'm being a homer here, so JP, you can chime in if you disagree. But yeah, I think Igbuka and Judkins probably are going to be in most first rounds, if not all. I think Henderson has a chance depending on draft capital. He could flop with Judkins. I think he could end up going before him in rookie drafts. I just think right now most people predict Judkins higher. I think Dylan Sampson, Jordan James, Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson, those guys are probably going to be more like second round picks. Maybe one could surprise with a deep run. A lot of talent here. Some guys that'll definitely be drafted in our rookie drafts.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Jordan James, Dylan Sampson, it would have to be a surprise where they're drafted as the fourth or fifth running back in the draft to a good landing spot to really rise up there. But outside of those two guys, yeah, it's the three OSU guys that I could see. And I'd probably project them to be there, if not top of the second at this moment.
All right, definitely some fun players to keep an eye on. I think we're going to see similarly fun players to keep an eye on from some of these next matchups, including 12 seed Clemson against the number 5 seed Texas Longhorns. Again, we're going to start with the road team. David, give us the quick overview on this Clemson team.
Yeah, first guy we're going to talk about is their quarterback, Cade Klubnik. He's finishing his third season, so he definitely could come back. 6'2", 210, maybe won a little more weight on the frame, but a big guy. 3,306 passing yards, 33 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, pretty good. Added over 500 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns. So definitely has a rushing element to him. Third in the nation in touchdown passes, pretty good. And I like this, 11th in big time throw percentage, but only the 16th lowest turnover worthy play. So not excellent in either, but the combination there I really like to see. Some upside there. I would expect him to come back for one more season and try to raise that draft stock a little bit, but anything could happen. The wide receiver, Antonio Williams, 5'11", 190, also finishing his third year, over 800 yards and 10 touchdowns this year. Had a pretty good freshman year, sophomore year derailed by injuries. Nothing's really stood out as elite to me at this point, but I've not dug super deep on him. I know he was a pretty highly touted prospect, so definitely someone to keep an eye on, but I kind of have a feeling these two are both going to come back. Just the vibe I have. Anything could happen, though, especially with Clemson and the way they handle NIL.
They have some money to spend. I don't believe those are players we really discussed in our 25 rookie tiers recently. So not guys that are as far out of the fantasy radar for us. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, I do think there's the talent there. Clemson getting into the playoff, if they were to go on a run, maybe they could get a little more on people's radars. Team kind of fell off. People had a sour note about the whole team for most of the season. I just don't think either has been super impressive to the point where they should to the NFL draft this year. That NFL paycheck can make people do things, so I couldn't fault them.
I will say with Antonio Williams, I've started to rise on him a little bit. If he were to declare this year, he would be 20 years old about when he's drafted. So I think that's pretty interesting. And if he does, have a good playoff run, I mean, he'd be, around 1,000 yards, double-digit touchdowns in his junior year. So somebody I'm fairly interested in. But yeah, we'll just see what he does.
And moving on to players who also might want to come back to college to help their draft stock. JP, who are we watching on the Texas Longhorns here?
Well, the player you're alluding to here is Quinn Ewers, their quarterback. This is his fourth college season. And the thing is, though, he came into college a year early, so he's about the same age as most third-year players. So that's a little bit interesting. And he just had trouble with injuries this year, last year. Arch Manning, we've seen time from him, who, if you guys don't know, Arch Manning is the backup currently, looking to take over probably next year. Ewers, he's never been super interesting to me. He's 13th in adjusted completion percentage. He was one of the highest rated prospects we've ever seen coming out of high school. It was ridiculous the amount of buzz he had coming out of high school, but hasn't really panned out as much. But it's not outside of the realm of possibility. He has a strong run here and raises his stock to where he is in potential first round conversation, but I kind of think that he won't at this moment. Some people do like him though. And they got two wide receivers that I'm pretty interested in. Isaiah Bond, this guy is a speedster. He's a junior, had a pretty underwhelming year, only 532 yards, 5 touchdowns. He had a little bit of a more interesting year last year at Alabama playing with Jalen Milroe. 10th in yak per reception. And this is another guy that he was on the freaks list coming out of high school. Yeah, I'm reading here that he ran a 10.48 100-meter, which that's extremely fast. Like, he's probably a guy that I would be near the top of my list to bet on for fastest player at the combine. So, and you know what kind of buzz that gets. I think that really helped Xavier Worthy's draft stock a little bit.
Speaking
But the
of Xavier Worthy, any chance Isaiah Bond is faster than him, JP? You want to go out on a limb here? Can I get you to say?
No, I would not be willing to go out on that. I mean, Worthy was unprecedented, so I don't think so. But he could come within a tenth of a second. But the other receiver I'm actually probably more interested in, to be honest, and that's Matthew Golden. He's 6 foot, 195 pounds. He is in his junior season as well. He had a better year than Isaiah Bond. He had 738 yards and 8 touchdowns. He kind of seemed to do better as the year went on. I mean, the SEC championship game, he had around 160 receiving yards. So he had a big game. He looked like the go-to guy in a Texas offense. So I think if he builds on that momentum, this is a guy that in a pretty weak wide receiver class, I mean, he could be a guy we're talking about as like the fifth, sixth, seventh best receiver in that range if he does impress here. And they do actually have a pretty interesting tight end as well, and it's Gunnar Helm. He is a senior this year. He's got good size, 6'5", 250 pounds. He's sixth in missed tackles forced, 11th in receptions, and ninth in yards. So I mean, 611 yards. That's darn good for a tight end. And I see him ranked as a top 5 tight end in this class in some spots. So he could further establish that.
You do hate those Texas speedy wide receivers. I'd love for them to both come out. Maybe we can get a AD Mitchell, Xavier Worthy type of argument chain this offseason if they both come off as well, JP.
You take the speedster, I'll take the other guy.
As is tradition. All right, so winner of this game is going to play Arizona State. David, anybody worth watching for them? Any
Yeah, actually, I think one of the players JP and I are both really excited to talk about in this video, someone who we haven't mentioned yet, but is pretty fun and is getting a lot of like national hype for the way he plays. He's Cam Scatabo, running back, 5'11", 215, finishing his 4th season. First 2 were at Sacramento. I don't even know what level that is, but his highlights from playing at Sacramento are great. It looks like the best kid on the high school team, just running people over. Had 264 rushes this year for 1,569 yards and 19 touchdowns. Had 37 receptions, 506 yards, 3 touchdowns. Top 6 in attempts, yards, touchdowns, 3rd best PFF grade. 3rd most yards after contact, missed tackles forced, and yards per route run. Pretty nice combination there. 2nd most first downs and receiving yards. Had over 2 yards per route run. All things we like to see. You watch him, even at Arizona State, guys just bounce off of him sometimes. I will be interested to see how he tests. I think if he can run sub 4.5, he might be one of the biggest risers in this Dynasty draft process. I think if he runs mid 4.5s, then we're probably looking at a handcuff kind of guy who's fun to have and might have some spike weeks. But really excited to dive deeper onto him. Someone that if you had asked us before the season started, I don't think JP or I could have told you who he was. Second player, though, just want to mention, not quite as exciting as Cam Scatabo, but wide receiver Jordan Tyson. He's finishing his 3rd season. He's 6'1", 195, 75 catches, 1,098 yards, 10 touchdowns so far, 3.08 yards per route run. Pretty solid. I don't know much about him. We were just kind of looking around through prospects in the playoff that we're interested in, and the numbers at least said to me that this guy has a chance to be drafted. So I'll be interested to see how he plays. I'll be interested to see what people who watch the tape on him say about him. Someone definitely will have a little more information on probably as the playoff plays out, but certainly in the offseason.
Yeah, those metrics on Scatabo are impressive. A lot of 2nd and 3rd, definitely behind a running back we will be discussing later. But I mean, 2nd is pretty good. Any chance that if this guy runs low 4.4s, has a decent playoffs. Say they even upset Texas. Does this guy have a chance, do you think, with the metrics we've seen where he's coming out of, to be up there with some of the other names we've discussed?
The way he plays, the things we've seen, I think if he tests well, I think he could go in the second in the NFL draft. I'm not going to bet on it. I think probably fourth round is more likely. Yeah, if he has a good playoff and he tests well with these numbers he has, and the energy he gives off is very fun. Very new to him, but watching his highlights is just really fun. If you like watching fun highlight videos,
Yeah.
I know that's not what people draft on, but it does speak to the hype around him. And I think there's a very, very outside chance he could be like a top 3 running back in this class, but I do think it's possible.
And JP, just give me the quick for who do you think has a chance out of these three teams to be a first round rookie pick for us, as well as who's kind of on that second round rookie pick radar?
It's hard to say that any of these guys will be in the first round conversation, to be honest. I don't really see it for any of these guys, to be honest. But the second round, I definitely think that like you could see a guy like Quinn Ewers there. He could be like top middle of the second. Maybe Antonio Williams at Clemson. He was a good run, with how young he is, with a pretty decent production profile. And Cam Scatabo, if he does rise up to being a day 2 pick, especially, I think those guys have a shot.
All right, definitely will be interesting to keep an eye on. And moving on to our next matchup, 10 seed Indiana at 7 seed Notre Dame. JP, starting off with the road team as is tradition. Who are we watching on these Hoosiers, this Indiana team?
We have another older quarterback who has performed fairly well, similar to as I talked about with Dylan Gabriel, and that's Indiana's quarterback Curtis Rourke. But Rourke, he has pretty good size actually. He's 6'5", 223 pounds. This is his 5th season. Gabriel was in his 6th. Rourke, he has only got 2,827 yards, but he has a good touchdown to interception ratio, 27 touchdowns, 4 picks. Isn't much of a rusher, but he has the second highest PFF passing grade. He's got the 7th best big time throw rate and 18th lowest turnover worthy play rate. So, I mean, this wasn't really a big name, but he's had a pretty good year, and I might be slightly more interested in him than Dylan Gabriel just based off the size that he has. I think that gives him a higher ceiling as a player. And then they have a pretty interesting wide receiver. It's a big guy, Elijah Surratt, 6'2", 209. He is in his 3rd season, so we always like that when we got the early declare. Had a pretty good year, 890 yards, 8 touchdowns. For a junior, that's a pretty solid season, especially in a weaker wide receiver class. And he's 16th in yards per route run, so for a younger guy in college, that's not bad at all.
Love to see it. I'm always a big fan of those yards per route run. Interesting to see if he declares for sure. As far as the QB Rourke there, is he at all a mobile guy? I see he had a bad pressure to sack rate, but was he able to get outside of the pocket at all, or does he seem more of a prototypical QB?
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much rushing upside there, unfortunately, but I mean, if he can be a starter in the NFL potentially as a guy that develops, maybe he's interesting in that way.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that for sure. And on the other side, the Fighting Irish, David, who are we watching out for here?
Yeah, really only one 2025 guy here, so I'll just quickly shout out potential RB1 in the 26 class, Jeremiah Love. Definitely not a lock to be RB1 next year, but had some pretty good numbers, looks pretty solid. But this year, we're talking about quarterback Riley Leonard. Had a lot of hype going into his junior year at Duke, transferred after a somewhat disappointing season. I would qualify this one at Notre Dame also somewhat disappointing. 2,085 passing yards, 16 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Did add 764 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns. Definitely good for college. Not sure the arm is there for the NFL, but I am not very good at evaluating quarterback talent. So if he gets the draft capital with that rushing upside, definitely interesting. Doesn't turn the ball over a ton. 11th best turnover worthy play percentage. Even though he had the 16 to 5 touchdown interception ratio, sometimes you just get bad luck. 10th best adjusted completion percentage, 14th best pressure to sack, 13th most rushing yards. So, solid at a lot of things, but not great. We would have liked to see more passing yards. But like I said, if an NFL team buys into him, lets him develop, maybe worth stashing on a bench, someone who gets a spot start here or there from injury and offers some rushing upside, definitely might be worth a roster spot.
Yeah, I mean, that 764 rushing yards, that's of course minus sacks in college. Could be, obviously we haven't done the math, but that's almost approaching, possibly like 10 yards a carry on those rushes. Obviously, I'm just speculating there, but usually you see a couple hundred yards of sacks taken off of that. 14 touchdowns, almost a rushing touchdown a game. Love to see that. So definitely a guy that if he gets drafted anywhere with a chance to start, I'm going to be drafting him everywhere probably wherever he's getting drafted, even if it's just a third or fourth round rookie pick quarterback that we're taking, just because love guys with the rushing upside.
He does have a really strong arm too. I know this guy was probably way more optimistic than anybody I'd seen, but Nate Tice before the season, I saw he had him as his QB1 heading to the season, which it was a hot take, but he said, I like the athleticism. I like that he is a big arm and he's got the size, and that you can bet on sometimes if it does develop, then it gives you a high ceiling.
All right, and moving on to the Georgia Bulldogs, talking about quarterbacks that are interesting to watch. What do we have going on here, and is he healthy, JP?
It doesn't appear so. We do not have much information at all, and I think there hasn't been a lot of talk about it this week because Georgia is on a bye, so they don't play until next week. But a lot of signs are pointing towards a torn UCL, which is that Tommy John surgery we saw Brock Purdy get. So if that's the case, if that's really what he has, then he is not going to be playing in the playoffs at all. He is a fifth-year guy. He's got the size. He had a good year last year. This year is a little bit underwhelming. It wasn't terrible. He had 3,466 yards, 28 touchdowns, but he had 12 picks. His completion percentage came down to 64% from last year. Doesn't add anything on the ground either. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about him because we'll talk about him more when we know more about him. But Trevor Etienne is their running back. This is a junior, right? We know his brother Travis Etienne. He was a first-round pick. And Etienne, he's 5'9", 205. He did miss some time this year, but he's a 13th best PFF run grade. And I mean, he was pretty darn productive and efficient as a freshman and sophomore when he was splitting the backfield in Florida. But I mean, with Georgia running backs, they usually do get drafted, and teams like to bet on those kind of guys from Bama and Georgia. So I think this is a guy that could rise up. He has lost some steam, but maybe he can build some of that back up here.
Yeah, I think between the Georgia playing in the SEC, the pedigree, definitely an interesting guy, and you know how much I love legacy players. Can't help it. And David, let's talk projected rookie draft capital for this group. Any first and then again second rounders that you see potentially in this group?
Kind of like the last grouping, it's going to be hard to see a first rounder here. I do think, kind of like that group, it would have to take Carson Beck, a team falling in love with him and taking him probably in the first, to be honest. I just don't see that happening. I think Trevor Etienne has a chance to be a second round rookie pick. I kind of think he has a decent chance to come back as well. And then, the guys from the first round, Rourke and Leonard, they're probably more like third round, fourth round rookie picks. So, some interesting things to watch, some room to grow and gain some hype for the draft season, but certainly no first round locks at all.
All right. And moving along to our final first round matchup, the 11 seed SMU Mustangs visiting the 6 seed Penn State Nittany Lions. David, anyone we're watching on SMU here?
Yeah, actually a new guy to my radar as well. Here, running back Rashard Smith, 5'10", 196, finishing his fourth year. First 3 seasons at Miami, he was listed as a wide receiver. So this might be another Tyrone Tracy kind of situation. Guy playing his first year at running back, having a very productive season. Someone will be interested to see a little more from in this playoffs. 215 attempts, 1,263 yards, 14 touchdowns, added 313 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. Yards per route run is 1.68, pretty good from the running back position. Had the 6th best PFF run grade, so definitely some things to like here. A little small, so probably not going to be a bell cow, but again, like we always say, how many bell cows are left in today's NFL? I think he's an interesting player. I think he could have a lot to gain, and I think Tyrone Tracy's success might even help him out a little bit.
We're definitely trending to smaller running backs being successful in the modern NFL. That satellite back role, there's no such thing as rarely such thing as a 3-down back in the NFL. So interesting to watch. JP, anyone we're watching on the Nittany Lions here? I think we're going to see a little bit longer list here, huh?
Yeah, certainly so. I mean, so we're going to look at Drew Aller here. This is a quarterback that I'm very interested in. He's got a lot of things I really like. We recently got news that his backup, who was supposed to take over next season, has entered the transfer portal. So it's a little bit curious that maybe it's a sign that Penn State knows something, that he knows something that Drew Aller could potentially stay, because he is a junior. He's in his junior season here, but he's had a pretty solid year. He's highly touted coming out of high school. He's a 5-star guy that everybody had a lot of excitement for. He's got size at 6'5", 235 pounds. He's got a great arm as well. And he had not an amazing season, but it was a solid one. He had almost 3,000 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He had the 7th best turnover-worthy play rate, 11th best pressure to sack rate. And last we saw him was against Oregon, and he almost led them to beating the number one Oregon team, and he made some really good throws, made some great plays. So I think this is somebody who could really, really rise up. I think a lot of people are expecting them to beat SMU. That's where I'd put my money as well. So we probably see him for more than 1 week. We're going with the betting markets here. He also has not really had any good receivers for his 2 years starting, really at all. I'm not going to talk about one here today. They didn't have one last year that we had any interested in, but they have two interesting running backs. Nick Singleton. This guy's an athletic freak. He's a junior. As a freshman, he had 1,000 rushing yards as well as his backfield mate, Katron Allen. But Nick Singleton is the guy that everybody's the most excited about because of what he offers with his size and athleticism. He's another guy that was on that freaks list. And when I read about him, there's multiple reasons why he's there. He had a 4.08 short shuttle coming out of high school, which would have been top 10 in the NFL scouting combine. And the most recent, I guess this was posted in 2021. It said in the most recent one. He had a 10.89 100-meter dash, so he's had the agility, the speed. He bench pressed 405 pounds coming out of high school. Power clean 350 pounds. I mean, there's just a bunch of things that are saying that this guy's a freak athlete. And also, Penn State, their strength and conditioning program, we see these guys be really, really good at the combine as well. So there's a lot of things that are to like about Nick Singleton. But after that freshman season where he was highly productive, there were some bumps as a sophomore. Was kind of a down year, but this year it's been pretty good. He's ninth in receiving yards and fifth in yards per route run. So not only does he have all the traits we like, but he's also a pretty good receiver as well. Katron Allen, not quite as excited about, but he's more of a banger back, even though he's a little bit smaller than Singleton. He's a little bit more compact. Doesn't quite have the athleticism. There's something to be said when you got a guy as talented as Singleton and you're getting more carries than him half the time. Half the games, I swear he's leading the backfield there. So I'm definitely interested to see how this plays out through the playoffs. And Tyler Warren, their tight end. Many people's tight end ones now. I mean, he's 6'6", 261 pounds. He was more productive than Theo Johnson last year, just barely when he was younger. And he has 88 receptions for 1,062 yards and 6 touchdowns this year. And that's on top of 22 rushes. Like, you don't see that for tight ends getting that many carries for almost 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. It was just a really, really good year. I just think that he's got a really high ceiling. The second best PFF receiving grade, third best yards per route run, third in missed tackles force. I mean, there's a lot of things that we really, really like about this guy. And they've moved him around in different alignment as well. So it's kind of what we saw from Brock Bowers, but he's not that type of prospect, but definitely a guy who could be in the first round rookie conversation.
You might have said he's not that type of prospect, but all I heard was he's Brock Bowers. Same, David?
There's a lot of stuff there pointing to it. Even had a passing touchdown. He snapped the ball on a trick play, like 7th in Heisman voting. I don't know if you said that, JP, but yeah, there's a lot to like about this guy. I definitely would not put him on the Brock Bowers level, but Brock Bowers Jr. Not going to say light either because he's 6'6", 260, but there's a lot of those same things. He's definitely an exciting prospect.
Literally Brock Bowers, quote JP Bennett. Before we move on, I do want you to just tell me, between those two RBs, who do you think is more likely to be a valuable fantasy asset? Just putting you on the spot a little bit here. Who do you think is more likely to go higher in rookie drafts, I guess? Kind of what I asked David with his Buckeyes earlier.
Yeah, it's definitely Singleton. We've seen more from him as a receiver and as an athlete. So it's not even a question for me that he's the guy I'm more interested in right now.
All right. And moving on to our final team, the winner of this game will face the Boise State Broncos. I think we all know who to watch on them. David, will you just gush for a minute about this guy?
Yeah, running back Ashton Janty. He's 5'9", 215, finishing his third season. Name a statistic, he's probably first in it. Efficiency or counting, either way, it doesn't matter. He just had an insane season. Arguably the best season we've ever seen from a running back. Certainly the best season people, our age and younger have seen. I do not remember Barry Sanders in college. I don't even know if I was alive for that, but he's chasing, Barry Sanders' yardage record, and it'll be in more games. But I think to this point, they actually had like the same, almost exact same amount of carries. So very similar kind of season there to one of the best, if not the best ever. Did not do much in receiving this year, but last year had over 500 receiving yards, over 3 yards per route run. So, I mean, he can do it all. The only possible knock you could have on this guy is he didn't do it against Power 5 competition regularly. But look, they played Oregon, and I think anybody who watched that game would say Ashton Janty was the best player on that field that day. I think he's going to be the 101 in pretty much all all rookie drafts this year. It is possible a quarterback gets some hype to go above him in Superflex drafts just because of this format. But yeah, Janty's a beast, and I'm excited to have him on any teams where I can.
I am excited to have a couple 101s where I know I'm going to be landing some Ashton Janty, unless Ted McMillan somehow just gets that landing spot with that quarterback. And then I'm just going to have a My head will explode. I'm hoping nothing happens that makes me want to take anybody other than him because he looks so good. Going to be fun to watch him in these playoffs. Whoever he ends up playing in the second round out of those two teams. Now, you already mentioned pretty probable 101. So, any other potential first or second round rookie picks we're expecting to see?
Yeah, I mean, I think the quarterback Drew Aller at Penn State could rise up there. That's not what I'm projecting now, but I think he could be QB 2 or 3 in this class, maybe even one if he has a really good run. So I think he could be in that conversation based on his youth, his upside, and all the tools he has. Nick Singleton, I think we got him as around like RB 5 or 6 right now in this class. So I think that definitely in a weaker wide receiver class that puts him in back into first round rookie draft consideration. And like I said, Tyler Warren, especially if you're playing tight end premium leagues, I think he's definitely in that conversation if he gets the capital and landing spot.
All right, good to keep an eye out for sure. And last thing we want to just tie up. We've talked to all these players, kind of what we think about them, but what about what we don't know, which is how well they're going to perform and how much they have to gain. Who do you think, JP, has the most to gain during these college football playoffs?
I would have to say that it is Drew Aller because he could return to school. He could be QB 1 or 2 in this class, honestly. If he takes them on a national championship run, which many people have said, I mean, I think David even agrees they arguably have the easiest road to the national championship. So if he does have a strong outing as this highly touted guy and has all the tools that you can ask for in a weak QB class, this is definitely somebody who could rise to be a top 3 or 4 rookie pick, honestly.
Always love to see that. More quarterbacks in our super flex rookie draft. So I'm hoping that you are correct there. And David, for you, who has the most to gain during these playoffs?
I think Galler's a great pick. I think Cam Scatabo would make sense. I'm going to go with one of my guys, Emeka Egbuka. I think his stock has gone up and down so much that he could be as high as wide receiver 2. I think Ohio State's offense is clearly better when he's involved. And my hope is that after watching the game plan against Michigan, after studying from that, the offensive staff learns that we don't just run the ball up the middle. We're good when we get the ball in our wide receivers' hands. I think if Emeka Egbuka can lead this team on a deep playoff run, put up some good numbers, I think he could get as high as wide receiver 2 in a mid first round pick. I think if he has another poor showing this, we lose to Tennessee, I mean, he can fall, wide receiver 5, 6 range, mid second, late second, even potentially. I think he'll probably end up on the border of the first and second, but definitely could gain a lot if he comes up and shows out.
And kind of flipping that question around on you, David, who has the most to lose? Who are we waiting with a bated breath, hoping that their fantasy stock does not plummet?
Yeah, this one's kind of hard because I think he's already lost a lot of it, but I think he is still holding on by a little bit. I'm gonna go with Quinn Ewers.
Life
I
support.
think, kind of, yeah, but look, if he shows up and plays well enough and he can be even a day 2 pick, I think he'll probably declare because he's not going to be Texas's starting quarterback next year. They're going to Arch Manning. I don't think it takes a genius to figure that out. So if he doesn't declare this year, he's coming back. He's going to have to transfer. He's going to have to learn a new offense, learn a new city, learn new receivers again. Is he going to be able to put it together next year and raise his stock back up there? I'm not sure. This is probably his best chance to get his stock back on track. I think a strong run from Texas, who has the roster to do it. They could go on and be the champions for sure. I think he's got a chance to reestablish himself as one of the guys in this class. And if he doesn't, he's going to be a pretty big fall from grace from where that recruiting profile was as a perfect rating.
And JP, same question there for you. Who has the most to lose in your mind?
If I had to pick a guy here, I'd probably go with Trevor Etienne because he already has lost some steam this year. And if in the playoffs he doesn't do a whole lot or doesn't look impressive, then I think he could be a guy in a strong RB class that could potentially fall outside of the top 8 to 10 running backs, honestly. He could also rise up too. So it's very interesting, but it's been disappointing this season.
All right, definitely will keep an eye. You know how much I love those legacy players, so every time I watch them play, he's always got my attention. So I'll keep an eye on him for sure. Hope he doesn't drop too much. And let's go ahead and just give me both of you guys a player that you've kind of just discovered during this process that you are most excited to watch. I'll start with you again, JP.
Yeah, it'll be the Arizona State running back that David talked about, Cam Scatabo. I mean, he kind of just burst onto the scene, wasn't a guy really on our radar at all. But oh my gosh, the last game that we saw him in the Big 12 championship, the run that he had, he got my darn attention because I kind of knew him a little bit at that point. But boy, it made me want to dive deeper on him because he broke like 6 or 7 tackles on one run in the Big 12 championship game. And then from there on out, you saw his high school highlights surfacing on Twitter. So it's like, okay, he got on everybody's radar at that point. But a guy has 2,000 scrimmage yards in college and can continue to add to those numbers and climb up. He's a very interesting guy that I'm glad that has surfaced in this process.
And you have to love when they can carry that workload because showing you can hold up for that. NFL teams pay attention to that because availability is an important ability for sure. And David, who is your guy you're kind of discovering through this process or learning more about through this process you're most interested in?
Yeah, I'm going to go SMU running back Rashard Smith. Look, 3 years working with wide receivers at Miami, probably a decent route runner at this point. I know he had to change positions. Maybe he's not, the guy you're going to split out wide, but you don't do that with running backs anyways. If he can threaten even just out of the backfield, maybe you can line him up in the slot occasionally. He had a pretty good season statistically as a running back. I don't know a lot about him, so I'll be interested to learn if this is just a mirage or if this is something real. But it seems to me like he could be another guy if he gets a decent spot. We take him with a third-round rookie pick, be a little patient with him, and maybe he gets his time to shine. So definitely interested to see how he plays and watch him in his first-round matchup.
All right, will be interesting to watch those RBs as well in the year of RBs, nonetheless. And just for fun, can you guys both give me a prospect or two to watch that isn't eligible for the 25 draft? David, give me yours first. And no Buckeye.
Oh, no Buckeyes. Well, I protest because I am talking about a Buckeye. Look, he's hit the ground running. Jeremiah Smith was the #1 recruit going into last season, wide receiver out of Ohio State. He showed up and showed out. He has, I believe, every major receiving freshman record at Ohio State now. He is likely to be the 101 in your 2027 rookie draft. He is probably going to be a top 5 pick. Obviously, this is just one season. He could, fade out a little bit. That certainly does happen. But he's big. He's got the size. He's got the speed. He's got great ball ability. He's good with the ball after the catch. It's like we didn't even lose Marvin Harrison Jr. He's probably even going to be better by the time he comes out.
And JP, who are your guys you're interested? Bonus points if you name the guy that I'll otherwise mention if you don't mention him.
I might actually let you take him because there's 2 Clemson wide receivers that are actually very interesting. They have these two guys that were very highly touted, and they've been very, very good. One was TJ Moore. He was a 5-star recruit who coming in they do a lot of these circuits and everything, and TJ Moore is a guy who really popped. And I think they could have a pair here in 2 years where they have 2 top 5 wide receivers coming into the 2027 draft. On top of Jeremiah Love and Ryan Williams, I mean that draft class is already looking really, really good. But yeah, go ahead and talk about the Tennessee quarterback. Is that who you're alluding to?
No, actually, who I'm really interested in seeing, I'm really just hoping for a Manning championship here. I'm hoping that he somehow takes the reins here. We saw him; he took the first snap in overtime a game recently. Was that in the conference championship game?
Probably that was an overtime game.
Yeah, he took the first snap in overtime in the conference championship game. There's, he's been getting worked in occasionally, whether it's because Ewers gets knocked out, etc. If they go on a deep run in the playoffs, I'd be very curious to see if he takes over, kind of like what we saw, in Alabama a few years ago in a championship game. If that type of thing happens, it's just something I'm partially because of the drama. I love those legacy players. It's something I definitely have my eye on for sure.
Yeah, I mean that would be very, very, very interesting. He's obviously somebody we're super excited about, and Quinn Ewers, there's already rumors about him getting NIL offers, like up to $5 million. There's a report, so we'll have to see about that. But I'll go ahead and mention the Tennessee quarterback. It's Nico, and I had to pull up the pronunciation. I don't know if you know how to say it, David, but it says Iamaleava.
I think it's Iamaleava or Iamaleava, something like that. Yeah. Basically how it's spelled, oddly enough.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I mean, this guy, he could potentially be the 101 in the 2026 draft class. He's a 5-star guy who this was his first year starting. He's got the size, a cannon for an arm. And this year, it wasn't an explosion from a sophomore, I mean, that we've seen from like Caleb Williams or CJ Stroud. But if he continues to rise up and has a big year next year, yeah, he's a guy who is in that QB1 conversation for next year.
All right, all right, all right. Love to see all these guys. Also, it's fun to look forward a little bit towards the next year for sure. By then, hopefully, you guys will drag me into some Devy leagues over this off season, and I'll be a little bit more in the loop than I am this season. But thank you guys for your deep research on this rookie class. That kind of wraps us up for here today. Let us know if we missed anybody in the comments below, who you're most excited to watch, who you're rooting for to do well, who you think has the most to gain, lose, whatever you want in the comments below. Always appreciate hearing from you guys. So from all of us here at the Data Construction Podcast, we hope you found this as useful for you as it was for us. Please remember to like and subscribe wherever you listen or view. And from all of us here, until next time.